Welcome back to another explainer. So, if you're watching this on YouTube right now, you are exercising liberties you probably take entirely for granted. You might have brewed a fresh coffee, chosen a colorful outfit to wear today, or even scrolled through some political commentary. But on our whiteboard journey today, we're exploring the dark, hidden logic of history, where those exact same, totally unremarkable daily routines could literally cost you your life.
Let me ask you this. What if your morning coffee was a capital crime? Just imagine your comforting morning brew suddenly turning into an executioner's block. It sounds like pure absurdity, right? We usually think ancient laws only dealt with major offenses like murder or treason. But the reality is, throughout history, rulers ruthlessly policed the physical body, the words people spoke, their wardrobes, and even the dinner plate out of sheer absolute desperation.
Okay, let's dive into Section 1, Threatening the Throne, Fragile Egos, and Political Paranoia.
So, back in an age before modern police forces, state security was incredibly fragile. Which brings us right back to that cup of coffee. Picture 1630s Istanbul. Sultan Murad IV is trying to control a deeply unstable Ottoman Empire, and he needed to find the source of the local sedition. And guess where he found it? The coffee house. See, traditional taverns actually posed very little political danger. Patrons drank alcohol, got drunk, sang some songs, and slept it off. Completely harmless. But coffee houses? Totally different vibe. There, patrons drank black coffee, stayed wide awake, and remained completely sober. They became these massive civic hubs where scholars and soldiers would gather and actively criticize the administration. To Murad IV, coffee wasn't a drink. It was a catalyst for revolution.
Following a massive fire in 1633, Murad issued a strict decree banning coffee, tobacco, and alcohol under penalty of immediate death. But here's the wild part. He didn't just sign a piece of paper and call it a day. He took a terrifyingly hands-on approach. He reportedly patrolled the dark streets of Istanbul himself, disguised as a commoner, and get this, he was trailed by a giant executioner. If he caught you just sipping a coffee, he'd cast off his disguise and order your immediate decapitation right then and there. And if you somehow survived and got caught a second time, no trial, you were literally sewn into a leather bag and thrown alive into the freezing waters of the Bosporus.
That exact same fear of the mind and the spoken word takes us over to 15th century England. Under the Treasons Act of 1351, it was actually a capital crime to compass or imagine the death of the king. Now, paranoid prosecutors quickly realized you didn't need a sword to imagine a king's death. You really just needed ink, paper, and the stars. In 1441, a highly respected astrologer named Roger Bolingbroke cast a birth chart, a horoscope, for King Henry VI, predicting the king would soon fall ill and die. In an era of deep superstition, the state didn't view this as quirky science. Oh no, it was seen as a dangerous psychological weapon designed to incite civil unrest. So for doing the medieval equivalent of checking a daily horoscope, Bolingbroke was dragged to Tyburn, hanged, drawn, and quartered, and his head was spiked on London Bridge as a graphic warning.
And rulers didn't just police what you drank or what you predicted, they absolutely policed what you wore. Like, if you walked down the street in the ancient Byzantine Empire wearing a rich shade of purple, you were committing a capital crime. See, Tyrian purple dye was extracted from the Murex sea snail. It took tens of thousands of these tiny snails to produce just a single ounce of dye, making it quite literally more valuable than gold. Because of this insane cost, it became completely synonymous with the emperor's divine right to rule. As Emperor Theodosius II bluntly decreed in 424 CE, wearing unauthorized purple was an act of usurpation. By draping yourself in that color, you were visually asserting you were equal to the emperor. And the punishment for that particular fashion choice? Yeah, high treason and execution.
Moving on to Section 2, Controlling Faith and Dogma, Enforcing Cultural Conformity.
Ruling powers were equally obsessed with policing your dinner plate just to maintain religious order. Imagine living in late 8th century Saxony, right in modern-day Germany. Your diet was literally dictated by the sword of Charlemagne. So, Charlemagne was fighting the brutal Saxon Wars, which were honestly just as much about forcing religious conversion as they were about expanding territory. To break the fiercely independent pagan Saxons, he implemented this horrific terror capitulary. Clause 4 of this law essentially turned eating meat during the 40 days of Lent into a capital crime. To the Carolingian state, slipping up and eating a piece of pork wasn't a dietary mistake. It was viewed as a deliberate, lethal sign of pagan rebellion and sheer contempt for the king's god. The punishment? Swift decapitation.
Now, let's fast forward a bit to Tudor England, where simply reading a book in your native language could absolutely get you killed. At the time, the church maintained an ironclad monopoly on the Bible by keeping it exclusively in Latin.
This ensured the clergy were the only intermediaries between God and the general public. But then a brilliant linguist named William Tyndale decided to challenge this. He translated the New Testament into English and smuggled these tiny pocket editions into the country hidden deep inside grain sacks. By making the scriptures accessible to the common blacksmith or farmer, Tyndale was directly threatening the massive wealth and political influence of the church, and for this he was relentlessly hunted down, betrayed by an associate in Antwerp, and then strangled and burned at the stake in 1536. His famous final words were literally, "Lord, open the King of England's eyes."
Let's move to Section 3, Monopolies and Extreme Economics, Greed, Espionage, and Survival.
Beyond politics and religion, some of these capital laws were driven by pure greed and the desperate need to protect wealth. For over 3,000 years, Imperial China held a fiercely guarded monopoly on silk production. The whole secret lay in the Bombyx mori silkworm. If you were caught trying to smuggle even a single silkworm or mulberry seed out of the country, it was classified as high treason. The result? Immediate public execution. But by the 6th century, the Byzantine Empire was getting desperate to break this monopoly. So Emperor Justinian I sponsored what might actually be history's earliest recorded act of industrial espionage. Two monks literally hollowed out their bamboo walking canes, hid live silkworm eggs inside, and remarkably managed to walk right past the Imperial Chinese border guards. Those two travelers risked a gruesome public execution for just a few tiny eggs, but they actually successfully broke a 3,000-year economic chokehold.
But honestly, perhaps the darkest economic law we're looking at today comes from the coastlines of medieval Europe. It was known as the Law of Wreck. Under this custom, any ship or cargo that washed ashore belonged entirely to the local coastal lord. Well, unless a member of the crew survived the wreck. If just one sailor survived, they could legally claim ownership of the salvaged cargo. You can probably see where this is going. This created a truly horrific incentive system. Desperate coastal communities, known as wreckers, would sometimes use false lanterns to purposefully lure ships onto treacherous reefs. And when the ship shattered, the locals would descend on the beach and outright murder any half-drowned survivors who managed to crawl out of the surf. By eliminating the survivors, they ensured the cargo could be legally claimed as abandoned wreckage.
So the crucial point is right here in Section 4, the big reveal, the evolution of liberty.
When we look back at these laws, our very first reaction is almost always disbelief. It just seems insane. But in an era without stable institutions or mass communication, these were actually highly logical, albeit desperate, mechanisms used by rulers to hold fragile societies together. And this brilliantly illustrates the overarching historical pattern, connecting these totally mundane activities to massive, systemic societal anxieties. I mean, drinking coffee wasn't really about the caffeine. It was about suppressing political dissent. Smuggling silkworms was about protecting a fragile economic monopoly. Wearing purple? That was a direct visual threat to imperial authority. Every single one of these actions hit the absolute weakest pressure points of their respective societies, which is exactly why they triggered such a lethal response.
Over many centuries, the slow, hard development of modern legal frameworks and secular governance gradually separated our personal lifestyle choices from matters of national security. Actually, a cup of coffee is no longer a political threat. Well, mostly. The safety and the personal freedoms we enjoy right now, they are definitely not the default state of human history. They are the hard-won exceptions built on the memory of those who literally lost their lives for doing the most normal things imaginable. So I want to leave you with this question to answer down in the comments. Knowing what you know now, what mundane liberty are you most grateful for today?
Please like and subscribe.